Think El Salvador is only known for gang violence and poverty? Wait until you find out there's a country where Bitcoin crashed 20% the day it became legal tender, where 500,000 people out of 6.5 million are involved in gangs, and where the president built the world's largest prison to hold 40,000 gang members in a space designed for 8,000. Number 15. El Salvador became the first country to make Bitcoin legal tender, and it immediately crashed the global cryptocurrency market by 20% in a single day. You heard right. On September 7, 2021, President Nayib Bukele forced every business in El Salvador to accept Bitcoin alongside the US dollar. The result was an instant financial disaster that rippled worldwide. BitGo's servers crashed from the flood of new users. Apple and Huawei app stores couldn't handle the government's official crypto wallet downloads, and Bitcoin's value plummeted from $52,000 to $42,000 within hours. Here's the crazy part. Most Salvadorans had never heard of cryptocurrency before it became their legal currency. Imagine waking up one morning and being told your corner store must now accept digital money that fluctuates wildly every minute. The government distributed $30 worth of Bitcoin to every citizen through the official Chivo wallet, but surveys showed 70% of Salvadorans never used it even once. Small businesses were forced to install Bitcoin payment systems they didn't understand for a currency their customers refused to use. It's like mandating that everyone pay with monopoly money, except monopoly money doesn't lose half its value overnight. Number 14. El Salvador has the world's densest gang population, with 1 in every 13 people involved in gang activity, creating a parallel society where gangs collect more taxes than the government. Think gangs are just street criminals? Think again. With an estimated 500,000 people involved in gang activities out of 6.5 million total population, El Salvador's gangs operate like shadow governments with more organizational power than many legitimate businesses. MS-13 and Barrio 18 collect an estimated $756 million annually through extortion. That's nearly 10% of the country's entire GDP and more than the government collects in certain tax categories. Every bus driver pays $2 to $5 daily to gangs just to operate their routes. Small business owners hand over 10 to 20% of their income as protection fees. Here's the terrifying part. Gangs maintain detailed databases of every resident in their territories, tracking family relationships, work schedules, and daily routines more efficiently than any government census. They issue travel permits for people moving between neighborhoods and levy fines for violations of their rules. The result is a country where criminal organizations provide more consistent services and enforcement than legitimate authorities. It's like living in a mafia movie, except the mafia actually runs half the country and collects taxes more reliably than the IRS. Number 13. El Salvador's president built a mega prison called CICOT that holds 40,000 gang members in a facility designed for 8,000, creating the world's most overcrowded detention center. Here's the scary part. The Center for the Confinement of Terrorism was constructed in just 18 months, and operates kind of like a human warehouse where inmates sleep in shifts because there aren't enough beds for everyone. The facility was designed with 8,000 capacity but currently houses over 40,000 suspected gang members, meaning prisoners literally sleep standing up or in 8-hour rotation schedules. Each cell built for 2 people now contains 8 to 10 inmates. The prison operates under complete lockdown. No visits, no phone calls, no recreational time. With inmates spending 24 hours daily in their overcrowded cells. Guards patrol with assault rifles, and the facility is surrounded by 3-meter-high walls topped with electrified razor wire. What makes this even more bizarre is that many inmates were arrested not for specific crimes, but simply for having gang-related tattoos or living in gang-controlled neighborhoods. The government suspended constitutional rights and arrested over 75,000 people in mass sweeps, meaning some prisoners have never been formally charged with crimes. It's like Alcatraz crossed with a refugee camp designed to disappear an entire generation of young men from Salvadoran society. Number 12. El Salvador is the only country where divorce was completely illegal until 2024, forcing couples to remain married even in cases of domestic violence or abandonment. Sounds unbelievable, but El Salvador was the last country in the Western Hemisphere to prohibit all forms of divorce until President Bukele finally legalized it in 2024. For decades, married couples had absolutely no legal way to end their marriages, regardless of abuse, infidelity, or abandonment. The Catholic Church's influence was so powerful that even civil marriages couldn't be dissolved. Women trapped in abusive relationships had no legal recourse except separation without remarriage rights. Here's the twisted reality. Many Salvadorans lived in common law relationships rather than marry, because marriage was literally a lifetime sentence with no escape clause. The country had thousands of married singles, legally married people who lived separately with new partners but couldn't remarry. Some couples hired lawyers to find legal technicalities to annul marriages, paying thousands of dollars for procedures that might not work. Others simply abandoned their spouses and started new families illegally. The irony is that while El Salvador had some of the world's highest murder rates, ending a marriage peacefully was considered more dangerous to society than gang violence. It's like living in a society where you can change your citizenship easier than changing your spouse. Number 11. El Salvador has a secret indigenous language called Nahuatl that only 200 elderly people can speak, and it's dying because speaking it was punishable by death for over 100 years. You heard right. The original Pipil people's language was systematically eliminated through government policies that made speaking Nahuatl a capital offense from the 1880s through the 1980s. Indigenous people caught speaking their native language faced execution, imprisonment, or forced labor. Parents stopped teaching Nahuatl to their children to protect them from persecution. The result is a linguistic genocide so complete that an entire civilization's knowledge is locked inside the memories of fewer than 200 people, all over age 70. Here's the heartbreaking part. These elderly speakers often refuse to teach Nahuatl to younger generations because they still fear government retribution, even though the prohibition ended decades ago. The language contains thousands of years of indigenous knowledge about medicinal plants, agricultural techniques, and spiritual practices that will disappear forever when these elders die. Some Nahuatl words have no Spanish or English equivalents, describing concepts and relationships that exist only in indigenous worldview. Linguists are racing against time to record these final speakers, but many refuse to participate because speaking Nahuatl still feels dangerous after generations of persecution. It's like having the last copies of an ancient library that the librarians are too traumatized to open. Number 10. El Salvador operates under a state of emergency that has suspended constitutional rights for over 2 years, giving police unlimited power to arrest anyone without warrants or evidence. Think emergency powers are temporary? Think again. Since March 2022, El Salvador has maintained a state of exception that eliminates basic legal protections and allows mass arrests based on appearance, location, or suspicion alone. Police can detain anyone for 15 days without charges, search homes without warrants, and monitor communications without court approval. Over 75,000 people have been arrested under these emergency powers. That's more than 1% of the entire population imprisoned without traditional legal processes. Here's the terrifying reality. Young men wearing certain clothing styles, living in specific neighborhoods, or having particular tattoos can be arrested on site and held indefinitely. The emergency powers were supposed to last 30 days but have been extended 24 consecutive times with no end date. International human rights organizations document cases of people arrested for wearing baggy clothes, listening to certain music, or simply being young and male in poor neighborhoods. Some families haven't seen their sons for over 2 years and don't know if they're alive or dead. It's like living under martial law disguised as crime prevention, where the cure for lawlessness is the elimination of all laws protecting citizens. The most chilling aspect is that these emergency measures enjoy 85% public approval because people prefer authoritarian safety to dangerous freedom. Number 9. El Salvador has invisible neighborhood borders controlled by gangs where crossing the wrong street can result in immediate execution, creating a city divided into deadly territories. Picture this. San Salvador operates like a giant chessboard where each square is controlled by different gangs, and moving to the wrong square means death. These territorial boundaries are completely invisible to outsiders but absolutely rigid for locals. A person living on one side of a street may never be able to visit friends living 3 blocks away because those blocks belong to rival gangs. MS-13 and Barrio 18 maintain such strict territorial control that residents carry mental maps of safe routes, forbidden zones, and neutral territories. Here's the deadly reality. Wearing the wrong color clothing in the wrong neighborhood triggers automatic death sentences. Blue clothing in MS-13 territory or certain number combinations can mark someone for execution. Children learn these invisible borders before they learn to read, and families plan their entire lives around gang geography. Some people haven't seen their own relatives for years because traveling to their neighborhoods means certain death. Public buses follow approved routes because drivers who enter wrong territories get murdered along with their passengers. The result is a capital city that functions like multiple isolated islands connected by narrow corridors of neutral ground. It's like living in a real-life version of the Hunger Games where districts are separated by invisible force fields, except the force fields are made of bullets and the punishment for crossing them is immediate death. Number 8. El Salvador's gangs created their own prison justice system where MS-13 and Barrio 18 leaders issue death sentences and execute prisoners inside government facilities while guards look the other way. Here's the shocking part. Inside Salvadoran prisons, gang leaders operate formal court systems complete with trials, evidence presentation, and execution protocols. These prison tribunals sentence inmates to death for infractions like media, serious faces of inmates listening, close-up of tense prisoner expressions, inmates standing in line inside cell block, disrespecting gang hierarchy, cooperating with authorities, or attempting to leave gang membership. The executions happen inside government prisons with guards' knowledge and sometimes assistance. Gang leaders maintain written records of their judicial decisions and operate appeals processes more sophisticated than some legitimate courts. Prisoners facing gang death sentences have nowhere to appeal because the government justice system doesn't recognize gang court authority, but also doesn't protect condemned inmates. Some prisoners spend years on gang death row, knowing they'll eventually be killed by fellow inmates while serving time for unrelated crimes. Here's the most disturbing aspect. These prison courts try cases involving crimes committed on the outside, meaning gang leaders imprisoned for one offense continue judging and executing people for completely different matters. The gang justice system operates parallel to government law, with its own evidence standards, witness testimonies, and enforcement mechanisms. It's like discovering that inmates have established their own Supreme Court inside prison and the guards are bailiffs for a legal system that doesn't officially exist. The irony is that gang courts often operate more efficiently than the legitimate justice system that imprisoned the judges. Number 7. El Salvador has a mandatory military service law that requires all 18-year-old males to serve, but gang members are automatically exempt, creating a system where criminals avoid military duty while law-abiding citizens must serve. Sounds backwards, right? The Salvadoran military refuses to conscript known gang members because they fear infiltration and violence within military ranks. This creates the bizarre situation where joining a gang provides automatic exemption from mandatory military service, while being a productive citizen guarantees conscription. Young men from poor neighborhoods face an impossible choice: join gangs and avoid military service, or remain law-abiding and get drafted into potentially dangerous military duty. The military screening process specifically excludes anyone with gang tattoos, criminal records, or suspected gang affiliations, meaning the most violent members of society avoid serving their country, while peaceful citizens bear the burden of national defense. Here's the twisted incentive structure. Gang membership becomes a legitimate way to avoid military conscription, essentially rewarding criminal behavior with exemption from civic duty. Some young men deliberately get gang tattoos or fake criminal records to avoid the draft, while others join gangs specifically to escape military service. The result is a military composed entirely of law-abiding citizens, while the country's most dangerous population remains civilian. It's like a draft system designed in opposite world, where being a criminal disqualifies you from serving your country while being a good citizen makes military service mandatory. The military essentially acknowledges that gang members are too dangerous to train with weapons and military tactics, but these same people roam freely in civilian society. Number 6. El Salvador's pupusa vendors must pay protection money to gangs, and the national dish cannot be sold without criminal organization approval, making food sales a gang-controlled industry. You heard right? Even selling the national dish requires gang permission and regular tribute payments. Pupusa vendors, from street carts to established restaurants, operate under gang oversight that determines where they can sell, what prices they can charge, and how much they must pay in weekly rent for the right to operate. Each vendor typically pays $5 to $15 weekly to local gang representatives, and failure to pay results in business closure or violence. Here's the insane reality. Gangs maintain detailed records of every food vendor in their territory, and collect taxes more systematically than the government. They issue permits for new vendors and can revoke selling privileges instantly. Some gangs even mandate specific suppliers for ingredients, taking cuts from the entire pupusa supply chain from corn flour to cheese. The extortion system is so sophisticated that gangs offer protection packages with different service levels: basic protection, premium location rights, and exclusive territory deals. Vendors who refuse to pay often find their carts destroyed, their ingredients contaminated, or themselves beaten or killed. The result is that El Salvador's most beloved cultural symbol cannot exist without criminal organization approval. It's like discovering that the mafia controls apple pie sales in America, except the mafia is more organized than the FDA and collects taxes more efficiently than the IRS. Every time someone enjoys a pupusa, they're participating in a gang-controlled economy whether they know it or not. Number 5. El Salvador has the world's highest murder rate historically, but President Bukel's gang crackdown reduced it by 95% in just 2 years, creating the most dramatic crime reduction in human history, while simultaneously eliminating constitutional rights. This isn't just crime reduction, it's social engineering on a massive scale that transformed the world's most violent country into one of its safest through methods that horrify human rights observers. In 2015, El Salvador recorded 103 murders per 100,000 people, making it more dangerous than active war zones. By 2024, the murder rate dropped to under 3 per 100,000. A reduction so dramatic that international criminologists can't explain it through traditional law enforcement methods. Here's the controversial reality. This transformation happened through mass incarceration without due process, indefinite detention without charges, and elimination of basic legal protections. The government arrested over 75,000 suspected gang members, essentially removing an entire generation of young men from society. Neighborhoods that averaged multiple murders daily now go months without violent crime. Children play in streets where they once cowered indoors. Businesses operate without extortion payments for the first time in decades. The paradox is absolute. The safest El Salvador has ever been coincides with the least free it's ever been since the Civil War. People can walk anywhere safely but can be arrested anywhere without cause. It's like living in a country that solved violent crime by eliminating legal rights, creating peace through authoritarian control. International observers can't decide whether to celebrate the crime reduction or condemn the human rights violations because both are equally extreme and historically unprecedented. Number 4. El Salvador's economy depends more on money sent home by immigrants than on any domestic industry, with remittances accounting for 25% of GDP and exceeding the value of all exports combined. Here's the mind-bending reality. El Salvador's economic survival depends on people leaving the country and sending money back. Over 2.8 million Salvadorans live abroad, nearly half the country's population, and they send home over $8 billion annually. This means El Salvador exports its people as its primary economic strategy, and those people's foreign earnings keep the entire nation financially afloat. The remittance economy is so dominant that it exceeds the combined value of coffee, sugar, textiles, and all other traditional exports. Entire towns survive solely on money sent from relatives working in the United States, creating communities where most working-age adults have emigrated and elderly grandparents raise children with money earned thousands of miles away. Here's the surreal part. Many Salvadoran villages have better cell phone coverage and internet access than some U.S. rural areas because staying connected to overseas relatives is literally a matter of national economic survival. Banks design their entire business models around processing remittances, and exchange rate fluctuations affect family dinner budgets more than local agricultural prices. The country has essentially become a massive labor export operation where success is measured by how many people leave and how much money they send back. It's like running a national economy through reverse immigration, where the most patriotic act is leaving your country and the most important industry is saying goodbye. The ultimate irony is that El Salvador's economic health improves as its population decreases, creating prosperity through organized exodus. Number 3. El Salvador sits on 20 active volcanoes in an area smaller than Massachusetts, and volcanic eruptions regularly destroy entire towns while simultaneously creating the world's most fertile soil for coffee production. Picture living on a landscape that can destroy your town overnight but also produces some of the world's most valuable coffee beans. El Salvador has the highest volcano density per square mile of any country on Earth, with 20 active volcanic systems crowded into just 8,000 square miles. These volcanoes regularly spew ash, lava, and poisonous gases that force mass evacuations and destroy agricultural areas. The Santa Ana volcano's last major eruption in 2005 killed 2 people and forced 8,000 residents to flee their homes permanently. Here's the incredible paradox. The same volcanic activity that threatens human life creates mineral-rich soil that produces coffee beans, selling for over $200 per pound in international markets. Salvadoran volcanic coffee is so prized that Japanese buyers pay premium prices, specifically for beans grown in active volcanic zones. Farmers literally plant crops on the slopes of volcanoes that could erupt and destroy everything they own, because the risk produces the highest quality agricultural products on Earth. Some coffee plantations operate evacuation plans alongside harvest schedules, and farmers check volcanic activity reports as carefully as weather forecasts. The result is an economy built on calculated geological suicide, where agricultural success depends on proximity to potential disaster. It's like living inside a pressure cooker that could explode any time, but also happens to make the best coffee in the world. The most successful farmers are those brave or maybe crazy enough to plant crops directly on volcanic slopes, knowing that their fortune and their lives depend on the same geological forces. Number 2. El Salvador's civil war created a generation of child soldiers who were kidnapped at age 8 to 12 and forced to fight. And many of these former child soldiers later founded the gangs that now terrorize the country. This is where El Salvador's current violence connects to its traumatic past in the most tragic way imaginable. During the 12-year civil war from 1980 to 1992, both government forces and rebel groups systematically kidnapped children as young as 8 years old and trained them as soldiers. An estimated 300,000 children were forced into combat roles, witnessing and committing acts of extreme violence during their most formative psychological development years. These child soldiers learned that violence solves problems, that authority comes from fear, and that survival depends on being more brutal than your enemies. Here's the devastating connection. When the war ended in 1992, thousands of traumatized former child soldiers had no education, no job skills, and no psychological support, but they had extensive training in weapons, torture, and organized violence. Many became the founding members of MS-13 and Barrio 18, applying military tactics and organizational structures to criminal enterprises. The gang initiation rituals mirror military training techniques, the hierarchical command structures copy army organization, and the extreme violence reflects wartime brutalization. These gangs didn't emerge from poverty alone, they emerged from a generation of children systematically trained to kill, and then abandoned by society when the war ended. The Civil War officially ended 32 years ago, but its psychological effects continue through gang violence that applies military-grade organization to criminal activity. It's like discovering that today's gang problem is actually unfinished Civil War trauma, where child soldiers grew up to become gang leaders and passed their military training to new generations through criminal organizations. The tragedy is that society created these monsters through war, and then acted surprised when they continued using the only skills they'd ever been taught. Number 1. El Salvador is building a new capital city called Nuevo Cuscatlán to replace San Salvador because the current capital is slowly sinking into the ground due to volcanic activity and overpumping of underground water. This is the most incredible secret about El Salvador. The government is quietly abandoning its current capital because it's literally disappearing beneath the surface. San Salvador sits in a volcanic valley where underground water extraction for the growing population has created massive subsidence. The city is sinking at a rate of 2 to 5 centimeters per year in some areas. Combined with volcanic activity that causes regular earthquakes and ground shifts, entire neighborhoods are gradually collapsing into underground cavities. Buildings develop massive cracks, roads split open, and infrastructure fails as the ground literally disappears beneath the city. Here's the mind-blowing part. Instead of fixing the problem, the government decided to build an entirely new capital city 25 kilometers away, and gradually move all government functions there. Nuevo Cuscatlán is being constructed as a planned city designed to house 2 million people with modern infrastructure, sustainable water systems, and volcano-resistant construction. The project costs over $15 billion and involves relocating the entire national government, Supreme Court, Congress, and major business districts to a city that doesn't fully exist yet. Some government ministries have already moved, creating the surreal situation where different parts of the national government operate from different cities. Citizens must travel between two capitals depending on which government services they need. The most incredible aspect is that this massive undertaking is happening quietly, with minimal international attention, as an entire nation literally moves its seat of power to escape geological disaster. It's like discovering that Washington, D.C. is secretly being relocated to another state because the original city is sinking, except it's actually happening in real time. The ultimate irony is that while the world focuses on El Salvador's gang violence and Bitcoin experiments, the country is undertaking one of the largest urban relocation projects in human history because their capital city is disappearing into the earth. So we've just discovered El Salvador's most explosive secrets, from Bitcoin disasters and sinking capitals to gang courts and volcanic coffee farms. Which one shocked you the most? The invisible gang borders, the child-soldier connection, or the fact that an entire capital city is being relocated? Subscribe for more incredible hidden truths about countries that are nothing like what you expected.